Where is this? Where am I?
The first thing Anne noticed when she opened her eyes was the ceiling, white, sterile, humming with fluorescent light. She didn't know how she'd gotten there. The last thing she remembered was her apartment floor rushing up to meet her face. And then nothing, just darkness and the distant sound of her own voice doing something embarrassing. Pleading. She had been pleading in her sleep, though she couldn't tell you with whom or for what. You are awake. A nurse appeared at her side, middle-aged, warm eyes moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had seen everything. Take it easy. You passed out. Your neighbor called 911 and tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Her head swam. Her body felt like it had been wrung out like a wet cloth and hung to dry. What happened to me? The nurse smiled, that particular kind of smile that holds information. The doctor will explain everything. But first, she adjusted the IV drip at Anne's wrist. How are you feeling? Like I died, Anne said flatly. Well, you didn't. The doctor came 20 minutes later. Young, bespectacled, holding a tablet like it contained the secrets of the universe. He sat down across from her, which Anne had already learned was never a good sign. Doctors who sat down were about to say something that required you to also be sitting. Miss Anne, he began. We ran a full panel when you came in. Your bleeding was stress-induced. Your cortisol levels were dangerously elevated, which triggered the episode. We've managed it, and you are going to be fine. He paused. But there is something else. She stared at him. You are pregnant. The word landed in the room like something dropped from a great height. Anne heard it, processed it, rejected it, and then processed it again. That is no. That is not possible. About 6 weeks, the doctor said gently. Early, but very clear on the scan. She sat with that for a long moment. 6 weeks. She counted backwards automatically, the way you do when the math suddenly becomes the most important thing in the world. 6 weeks ago, she and Cole had spent a weekend in Savannah. They'd driven down on a Friday night with the windows down and an old playlist playing and his hand warm over hers on the gear shift. It had been the best weekend of her life. 6 weeks ago, everything had been perfect. She thought about Cole, now her Cole, with his loud laugh and his terrible jokes, and the way he always burned the bottom of rice but presented it to her like he was Gordon Ramsay. She thought about how he would react to this news. She almost smiled. He would probably cry. He was the kind of man who cried at things, commercials, sunsets, other people's wedding videos on YouTube. He would hear the word pregnant and completely fall apart in the most beautiful way. Except she hadn't spoken to him in 3 days. That was the thing pressing at the back of her mind, the thing she'd been trying not to look at directly. 3 days of silence. 3 days of unanswered calls, unread messages, the hollow sound of a phone ringing into nothing. She'd told herself he was busy. She'd told herself there was an explanation. She'd told herself so many things that she'd worked herself into a state that apparently required hospitalization. She asked for her phone the moment the doctor left. She called him. It rang. It rang. After 3 days of dead silence, it rang, and on the third ring, he picked up. Baby, his voice hit her like sunlight. Bright, warm, completely and utterly him. She felt the tension release from her shoulders in one long exhale. She hadn't realized how terrified she'd been until she heard his voice and the terror dissolved. Cole, she laughed. A short, broken sound. Oh my God. I've been trying to reach you for 3 days. I ended up in the hospital. I was so scared. Hey, slow down, hospital. What happened? Are you okay? I am okay. I am okay. She pressed her free hand over her mouth. She was going to cry. She could feel it. I have something to tell you, something big. You are scaring me. What is it? In the white hospital room, with the IV still in her arm and the fluorescent lights humming overhead, she said the words she had been rehearsing in her head since the doctor sat down. We're pregnant, Cole. We're going to have a baby. Silence. Not a short silence, not a shocked, processing silence, a long one. The kind that has texture and weight. She waded through it, her heart doing something strange in her chest. Then next he said, "What do you mean?" "We," she blinked. "What? How? I don't understand. How can you be pregnant?" Something about his tone was off. Not shocked, not even confused, exactly. Something else. Something that made the hairs on her arm stand up slowly. "What do you mean, how?" she said carefully. "Cole, it is ours." Another pause, and then, in a voice that was polite in the way that strangers are polite in the way that people are polite to people they don't know, he said, "I am sorry." "Who is this?" The room tilted. "What? But you just called me baby when you picked up," she slowly responded. "Well, that's because it was stored as baby on my phone," he responded. "But I don't. I think you have the right number." He continued, "Who are you trying to reach?" He asked, "Stop it." Her voice came out harder than she intended. "Cole, stop. This isn't funny." "I am not, ma'am. I genuinely don't know who you are. My name is Cole, but I don't think we've met. Can you tell me how you got this number, ma'am?" He had called her ma'am. This man who had kissed her temple while she was sleeping and called her his entire world had just called her ma'am, like she was a stranger asking for directions. "Cole," her voice cracked on his name. "It is Anne. It is me. Stop this. I am sorry. I don't know an Anne." "I think there has been some confusion," she couldn't breathe. Her hand was shaking. The phone felt like it weighed 30 pounds. "Is this a joke?" she whispered. "Tell me this is a joke." "I am sorry to upset you," he said. And he sounded genuinely sorry, which was somehow the worst part. "I really don't know who you are." She ended the call. He called back within 30 seconds. She watched his name light up the screen. Cole. She had saved him with a moon emoji because he always called her his moon, and she felt something inside her chest close like a fist. He kept calling. 7 times 8. Between calls, texts began arriving, all some variation of the same thing. "Please call me back. I think I can explain. Please don't be afraid. Don't be afraid." As if she was the one behaving strangely, as if she was the one who needed to explain herself. On the 9th call, she blocked his number. She lay back against the hospital pillow and stared at the white ceiling, and made a decision that people only make when they are in tremendous pain and have convinced themselves. It is actually strength. She decided that she was done. Done with Cole. Done with the city. Done with the life she had built around a man who, when she needed him most, had looked her in the face, or as close to the face as a phone call allows, and said, "I don't know who you are." She was 23 years old, 6 weeks pregnant, lying alone in a hospital bed, and she had never felt more certain of anything. She was going to disappear. She didn't tell her parents. She couldn't face the particular kind of pain that would live in her mother's eyes. The specific way her father's jaw would tighten. She packed one suitcase, withdrew her savings, and bought a bus ticket to a small city in Oregon, a place she had visited once for a conference, and remembered for its quietness, its enormous sky, its quality of existing slightly outside of the normal world. Portland had kept its promises. It was quiet in the way she needed quiet. She found a studio apartment. She found a job at a coffee shop, then a diner, then a clinic. As a receptionist, when the manager noticed she was organized and calm under pressure. She had the baby, a girl, small and furious and perfect, with her mother's eyes and, heartbreakingly, her father's smile, and she named her Cherish, which meant everything she was choosing to keep, because that was the only defiant thing left to do. She did not think about Cole. She trained herself out of it the way you train yourself out of any bad habit, with repetition, with substitution, with the exhausting daily discipline of choosing not to. When something reminded her of him, a song, a smell, the particular amber light of late afternoon, she redirected. She became very good at redirecting. Cherish grew. Anne grew with her. She got her JED, then her associate's degree, then in the proudest moment of her life, sitting in a folding chair in a community center while Cherish, age 9, screamed her name from the 3rd row, her Bachelor of Science in Nursing. She was 32 when she started at Cascade General Hospital, Ward 4B, Recovery and Long-Term Care. She was 32 when she met the man in bed 7. His name was Gilbert Mark. He had been in a car accident, a bad one. the kind people weren't supposed to walk away from, and he had, against considerable odds, walked away from it. Or rather, he was in the process of walking away from it. He had 2 healing fractures, a repaired spleen, and a disposition that confused most of the nursing staff, because he was simultaneously the most patient they'd ever had and the most quietly devastating person to be around. Anne noticed him the way you notice something that catches light differently than everything else in the room. She told herself it was nothing. She was a professional. She had a policy about patients, a very firm, very sensible, very non-negotiable policy. But there was something about him. Something she couldn't name, couldn't locate, couldn't reason away no matter how hard she tried. When he laughed at something on his television, the sound moved through her strangely. When he looked at her with that direct, unhurried attention, she felt simultaneously seen and destabilized. He reminds you of Cole, she told herself one night, driving home. That is all it is. He is a tall man with a good laugh, and you are simply having a grief response that is 9 years overdue. Get it together. She got it together. Mostly, Gilbert was discharged after 6 weeks. He came back 3 days later on the pretense of returning a phone charger he'd borrowed from the nurse's station, which was transparent enough that even the charge nurse raised an eyebrow at Anne across the desk. He asked if she wanted to get coffee. She said no. He came back the following Tuesday with the same question. She said no again. He came back on Thursday with coffee for her, which she accepted only because it felt rude not to, and they ended up sitting in the hospital garden for 45 minutes talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. She said yes to dinner the following week. She told Cherish about him 3 months in. Cherish was 14 by then, sharp, skeptical, brilliant, with her grandmother's nose and her mother's tendency to ask the exact question you were hoping she wouldn't. "What is his last name?" Cherish asked, not looking up from her homework. "Mark? Is he local?" "He moved here from Atlanta." Cherish finally looked up. "Mom, are you sure about this?" "I am sure about nothing," Anne said honestly, which made Cherish laugh despite herself. She was sure about him eventually. That is how it happens, not in a moment, but in accumulation. In the way he remembered how she took her tea. In the way he talked to Cherish like she was a full human being whose opinions deserved consideration. In the way he looked at Anne sometimes across a room, like she was the answer to a question he'd been carrying for years. 2 years in, he asked her to marry him on an ordinary Tuesday, in her kitchen while she was making dinner. She said yes, and then he said, "I want you to meet my family." They were to drive home the following week to meet his family. The drive to his family home in Atlanta took 9 hours. They drove it across 2 days, staying overnight in a small town in northern Georgia where the motel had a broken heater and they stayed warm the way people in love stay warm. She was happy. She was the particular kind of happy that frightens you because you know it is the kind that costs something. She should have known. Looking back, she would always say she should have known. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon. The house was large, warm, full of the organized chaos of a family that liked each other, aunts, cousins, a grandmother in the corner who assessed Anne with the eyes of someone who had been assessing people for 80 years, and was very good at it. Gilbert's mother embraced her like she'd been expected. His father shook her hand with both of his, and then from somewhere deeper in the house a voice. A voice she knew the way she knew her own name, deeper than it used to be. Slower. But he came around the corner and stopped. And Anne's entire life rearranged itself in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Colomark stood 10 feet away from her, wearing a blue shirt, holding a glass of water, looking at her with an expression she had never seen on any human face before. Like a man who has been told that something he thought was gone forever has been returned to him. And he doesn't yet trust it enough to move. Gilbert's hand was warm at her back. "Anne," Gilbert said, smiling, gesturing between them. "This is my brother Cole." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Cole set his glass down very carefully on the nearest surface, like a man who has just realized he is not steady enough to hold things. "Hello, Anne," he said. His voice was quiet. It was the voice of someone who has practiced for this moment and is discovering that practice was not enough. She couldn't speak, she couldn't look away. 9 years collapsed into nothing. The apartment in Portland, the bus ticket, the hospital room, the white ceiling. I don't know who you are, the baby, the years. All of it present and pressing, and suddenly, sickeningly connected. Gilbert looked between them, his smile beginning to shift. Do you two know each other? The story continues in part 2. Find out what happened next.